Good evening, welcome to another summer's evening at Relove Guitars. I've just spent 3 hours not successfully wiring up a preamp. There's a problem with this thing. I've had two of them, I've got two of them. I've tried, one is in my other guitar now, trying to work. The problem with it is, even if you can get it to work, which I haven't been able to very successfully, I thought I had it working. But it turns out you don't know, because you can't test it until you've got strings going over the guitar. And that means taking the scratch plate off, well, putting the scratch plate on with all the preamp underneath it, putting strings on, testing it, switching the switch. Oh look, it's not working properly, what's wrong? Or do I know what the volume switched to? No, I don't, because there's a little trim pot underneath. So even if you could get it working, this little trim pot here means you can't set it. You have no way of setting it to a useful volume unless you drill a hole and somehow make this accessible from outside your guitar, which, given where you're going to place it, could be impossible, unless possibly there's a hole through the scratch plate, maybe on the wall of the thing by the switch. I don't know. I'm sort of giving up, really. I couldn't get anywhere close to it. Anyway, forget that for now. This is Martin's Jazzmaster. And so this is a left-handed Fender Jazzmaster, and Martin brought it to me, and I could tell a kind of degree of frustration had crept in with this guitar. And Jazzmasters are beautiful things, and they are confusing things as well for some folks. And I'm not an expert in them, because first and foremost, I've never owned one. But you know, you can do a bit of research, and the thing about doing some research is it's really good if you sort of know what you're looking for. There's a point where you can get with some experience which tells you what to look for and tells you what to discount. So I'm sort of at that stage where I can research pretty quickly. See that little telltale sign there? Look, that's a little bit too tightly done. Yeah, so yeah, you know, that's the only good thing. I don't know everything, but I do know how to find the things I need to know. So that's a kind of skill that you get with age and experience, I suppose. So Martin brought this to me, and he demonstrated to me something that he really didn't like about it. So I'm just going to put this here for a minute. And he was playing it. Let's take this out for a second. He was playing it, and there was a kind of there's a thrumming noise coming from inside somewhere here, and he couldn't sort of figure it out, and he'd already had the bridge slightly changed for, or I think he improved that, got a different kind of bridge with a grommet, a sort of UPTFE sort of, whatever that stuff's called, PVC, I don't know, plastic insert to try and cure it, and to be honest, it really wasn't doing anything. So the brief for me really was, I think mainly, judging by his frustration, was could I figure out what was causing that vibration? And I thought it was something down here, not in the bridge. I mean, the bridge does pick up a lot of vibration. You can feel it. It's, as you'd expect, but it wasn't creating the sound. I figured it was coming from under there, and there's a few plates under there with the spring and stuff. Also, I think there was a problem here that the locking part didn't seem to work. And what I can see here is that the screw, I think it's from new. Martin's obviously done quite a lot of adjusting, and I think it's a sign of somebody trying to find the right setting for this to get it to work. And I think the frustration is, you know, a good point to sort of hand it over and say, can you put some fresh eyes on this? There was also a question about whether the neck needed shimming or had enough height. Now the issue about the neck height is only because, or primarily because, these bridges, I don't know how well you can see this, let's zoom in a bit. These bridges, again, it's one of those things, Leo Fender never really made any mistakes. So these bridges do work. The downside of this guitar, in a sense, is that it has a lot of string travel behind the bridge. And because of that, first of all, you get a lot of sympathetic vibration off here, so you can get quite a bit of noise coming off these things anyway. But you know, for some people, that's the character of the Jazzmaster and what's good about it. But the other thing that some people find is if the neck angle's wrong here, what you get is it's hard to describe. You get too low a break angle over these saddles, and some people find that they pop out and go wandering because they're not held down. Not only that, they won't make a solid enough connection with the string to make a good launch point. You see on some guitars, what kind of guitars will they be? People who use Bigsby's often end up with lots of strings like this, and they buy or modify bars that will hold the strings down like that to create an artificial break angle to keep the strings in line. This one, judging by the break angle of the strings going over, not the back, some people get uptight because however they do it on some guitars, you get the string touching the back of the bridge. To be quite honest, if it does that, that's not really a problem. Damping this off is not a problem. And if anything, it's a good thing to want to do. So I'd never worried too much, because some people kind of criticize people and their setups, and they say, look, you've got the strings touching the back, and they go, you idiot. I would, you know, if I had to, I would rather have the strings touching the screw there. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with the string touching that screw. It's already touching the saddle, which is touching the screw, which is touching the spring, which is touching the thing. Everything's touching. If the string happens to be touching down on the screw head, there's no problem either way. It's not going to create any strange out of tuning issues, nor is it going to increase more or less vibration coming through the string to the body. So so the first question for Martin is that looking at the well, okay, let's take a view on this, right? So if we look at the height of this, now I know that he wants a low action, so we look at the action on this, and we can see that on the bass string, low E, it's sort of two. I can't really no, it's 1.5, 1.6, 1.7. It's not bad. On the high E, it's a little bit too high for my liking. So the truth is, I would want to take them down just a fraction. Now that will, again, this is what happens. If you take the action down here, then you are reducing the angle here very slightly, and it may be that you run into not enough break angle. In which case, you do need to shim the neck to get the lower action without reducing the height relative to this. The height of the bridge relative to this is what creates your break angle. So if your neck is shimmed, now I'm looking, sorry, that's a terrible, I've just moved the thing. So if your neck is shimmed up this way, you get a very low action, but this stays the same. If you shim your neck even further, then you'd have to raise this quite a bit to still get a very low action, but then you increase the break angle here, which is what you might want to do. So the question is at the ideal angle or height, do we have the right action? Sorry, do we have the required amount of break angle? That's the question. So I have to figure out. I've got the pack of bits somewhere. Which is the right one for here? So anyway, the good news is offline. I did a little bit of research. Is this the size? No. This ain't the... I don't understand. That can't be the right size. It's too small, far too small. No, bloody is the right one too. God, would you believe it? Yeah, offline I did a bit of research to see what might be causing this problem. And what I discovered, let's lower this down a bit here. What I discovered was, I think, what was causing it. So what we can do, I'm just taking this down to get to the ideal last fret action. Now I measure at the last fret, you don't have to, it's not a necessary thing. So I'm taking this down to 1.5 and 1.2, and then the idea will be, like any guitar, to make sure that it plays with that action. But the first thing I'm going to just demonstrate is what I think was causing the thrum. Typical now, I can't recreate it. Let's try. So what we had is, I think we had, this was too loose. Now it wasn't set right for locking, so now it's now going to make a monkey out of me by not making that noise, but wherever it was set, it was probably too loose. Not doing it now, but this was set too loose for it to work as a locking trem. So you can see that it works perfectly well as a tremolo, but what I noticed is when you put it into locking position, it's supposed to stop it going back. So it didn't do that. Now the way you do it is with this, you keep turning it and tightening this screw up quite a lot until in the locking, there's the thrumming. Still, when you raise it back, it's still up tuning, going up in pitch. So it's still doing that. This should be locked. So what we do, let's just check it is in the right direction. Yeah. We go until, we tighten it up until it just stops the strings raising in pitch when we go back. And you can hear it starts to hit the limit. So hear that thrumming? Horrible. Get right up close to that so you can hear this. That thrumming is, I think, caused by the plates on here not being quite in the right place. So basically you want to lock it off at the point where it doesn't do any up tuning at all, and you could actually do it to the point where you could go a little bit far and do it to the point where you can't even get I think you may be able to get it without a click in it. There you go, no click. That may be too far if you don't mind the click part. So you've got, now it's locked and there's no click when you go back. Well, there is if you slam it back, but from rest there's no, if you leave it at rest there's no backward click. That's kind of a bit academic. So if we slack it off a bit more and we go to the point where we're getting a click from rest, bending it back gets a click, but we don't really mind that. But any more in this direction, you see it starts to tune, bend the pitch up, and it also starts to thrum. So we definitely want to tighten it up until there's no pitch rising at all when you pull back. So still some there. Remember, this is only in the lock position. That's really the first point where, and then normal. We've got possibly maybe a little bit of ping on the nut there. Fine. So let's get a tuning out of it. Tuning fork. Yeah, so I think the thrumming is coming from these plates. Ah, that's not locked. Oh, what's happened there? Weird. Ooh, that's interesting. That didn't lock. Ah, see, right, you've got to press it down to lock it. That's a bit odd. Locked. See that? Don't know whether that's the be all and end all of how it's supposed to work, but that's how it's working here. So locked, sorry, locked. That's interesting. Check the note. That's the bit that you've got to get right. It's getting the tuning right when you lock. That's in tune. Not really sure the rule of that. Something about there's a point at which it's the same note when you do it, when you unlock it, as when you lock it. It seems to be that has to be the equilibrium point, because there's no point in doing something else if you get it. I was following a point where it stays locked and doesn't move anything. I think the key point is to set the tension here at that note, so the note stays the same when it's locked. There you go, that'll do. That is in tune. So we've lost the horrible thrum, so that's good news. Now, so on this guitar, what I'm going to do, having set the action very low, I'm going to just check the neck relief, check the first fret action. Then what I'm going to do is set up to do a fret level if we need to. Now maybe the frets on this are perfect enough to not require any leveling. We don't know. It has happened. It can happen. It's not impossible. Let's go to zoom out, please. Not impossible. Let's just have a look at the, first of all, let's look at the relief. So pretty flat, certainly on the treble side. It's showing up as almost no relief at all. But there is a tiny bit, so what I'm going to do is just play through the notes, see what we've got. Bit of fret slap. Bit of fret slap on the low E at the moment. Not bad. So what we've got is a bit of fret slap on the low E. I think in my experience this is a very flat neck at the moment. I think this needs a tiny bit of, a little bit more, ooh, that's quite stiff, a tiny bit more relief in it than it has already, which might tidy up a little bit of the slap that I'm picking up, or it may, that's about right. Cleans up those notes there. They were a little bit creaky down here. Okay, so not bad. We got very low action, a little tiny bit more relief. We can do a fret level to just cure that fret slap over on that side, which will be not a problem to do. So no individually low or high frets, but the precision leveling is actually more about clearing up the space for the strings to rotate in. And funnily enough, you normally do that by creating more relief, but I think I've drawn this out before, but I'll do it again just for fun. When you have a neck under load, the neck under load, kind of, the fingerboard sort of looks a bit like that. That's not very zoomed out, is it? Sort of a bit like that. And interestingly, because in the fret leveling process, I use a sort of sample point here, a sample point there, and a sample point there to map the neck, if you like. What we get out of it is a very smooth curve, as you can see. That's a bit exaggerated, but you can see from my little picture how the smooth curve actually doesn't replicate or doesn't match the slightly inaccurate wobbly curve. And this is kind of like this is how it is, because the neck is under what I call longitudinal compression from either end, with the strings on, and under load it squishes it and it undulates a little bit, It does that anyway because it's a wooden thing and it probably isn't massively precise. But the nice thing is, regardless of what these individual, or these, every part it's doing, what you'll find is that in truth, when there's frets on it, if we take away, this is my sample points, right? If you take those away, but you can see that I've made a sample curve. In reality, you've got frets that sort of sit there, sit there, sit there, sit there, following the thing, and sit all over the place. So, because they're on this slightly undulating piece of wood, they're sitting all in slightly different places, even though by and large the neck overall describes a curve. But you can see from this picture that what the curved truss rod does is it goes back onto these frets and just gently takes down the ones that are in the way. Now these aren't technically uneven frets or high frets, really. They are just, if they're high at all, it's because of this slight change in the shape of the fingerboard. But this truss rod tool does a brilliant job of just sitting in and making that curve fit. And it appears, in my experience, to be enough to eke, or just clear up that fret slap as I was describing it. So the offset contour body, beautiful looking thing. I think what I will do is I may just widen these. We're going on the if it ain't broke, don't fix it principle here. Actually, as it happens, I do have some lefty curved nuts, but I don't even know. This is a Strat nut, so I don't know how close in shape it would be, even if we wanted to fit one. But I say I kind of prefer the if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Actually, it's about the same size. It's not bad. But like I say, that's well fitted. What do they call it? Micarta, isn't it? That's what they call it. But I might just slightly widen those slots just to sort it out. Now they are a little bit higher than I would go. So what we can do at this point is let's just tweak them. Now the funny part is I've got these Hosco nut files here, which I haven't really used yet. So we've got the 10 size down here. And they are well done in the sense that they're designed to create a sort of notching effect. So that's the 13 size. So if we put them into the space here, we should be able to widen them out. But actually, I haven't really practiced on these on a standard regular setup yet. So what I will do is I'll revert to my known widening file, and this is something that I know how to use to open up the slot and just make sure that we get exactly where we want to go without lowering the action, or if we do lower it, lowering it to the 0.3, but leaving it just slightly open. Great thing about having it open, like in a V shape, is that it guarantees that the sides of the slot don't grip the string. Just about on the mark. So I can see exactly where this is. Is it going to cut the height down at all? There we are on the mark. So having just kind of opened the slot up a little bit, it means we won't get it pinging, which is what we want. So when I do this, I cut really backwards first, just get into the slot and just gently cut backwards, so that I come towards the front, and so I know that when I get there, I've still got the original height, and I've got a backwards slope, which is what I want. So, and then as I get to the front there, I can afford to allow it now to cut down a tiny bit. And this really, it's not so much that the height was bad on this, it's just that we want the slots opened up so they don't grip the strings. If we're going to keep this nice, well fitted, nicely finished nut. should do some practice on those Hosco ones. It's just I haven't got round to it yet, so I actually don't like to. I don't want to put them into service, active service, without getting a good feel for them. It would be a bit of a silly thing to do. What a terrible thing to do. So this is taking it very slowly, so you might think, God, that's taking forever. It's better that it does than I overcut it, you see. But what it does show me is, as I'm getting to the place I want it to be, it shows me that the amount of material above the actual slot here is quite a lot. In fact, what I think I'll do is, once I've cut these to the right height, I'm going to then, when the strings are off, I'm going to cut this excess material away. Okay, there we are. Because there's just we don't need it, and it just exists to tell you that your nut has got more material on it than you need. And kind of don't understand why they do it like that. Because the thin, tall, straight-sided slot, some people think it's all looks beautiful and perfectly done, but all it does is increase the chance of it gripping the side, or the sides of the wall, gripping your strings, which you really mostly can do without, or is what you most want to not have. That's the string tree, which we're going to replace with a tusk one, I think, just to get this as nicely smooth working as possible. So even though I'm trying to lower the front edge of this a little bit, I'm doing it whilst cutting backwards. Okay, that'll do. Now we go to the back three, the low three. Now these were pretty close actually. I will just open the slot up a little bit on this one too. Reduce the chance of gripping and friction. So I suppose I could use this now, couldn't I? We're on the what side? We're on the 36 side, right? 36, 46, 36, 36, 26, 36, 46. Lovely. So, I'm going to go back to this because I'm still more familiar with this right now. Oop, was on my phone? I don't think it was. Anyway, although I might use I'll use the thing to, there we go, round out the bottom. Round out the bottom. Actually, that was the one. Round it out, and then this one. I'd say that's on the mark. I wouldn't go anywhere with that one. Right, so the first thing I will do is I'm going to get some sand paper. We're going to replace these strings. So what I'm using is, I'm just using, how well can you see? You can see that? There you are. I'm using the strings in here as a sort of top guide to help me determine where to level or file the nut to. This is bone, I think, so, but it's nicely fitted, so I thought we'd work with it to show willing. So the aim here is to sand this back to a nice smooth or low profile. Since we don't need all that excess material on top. And actually we probably now just need to move these off, and I'm going to keep going from the G and the D need a bit working on. Get in now. Okay, so when the strings are off, after I've done the leveling, I'll just smooth that off and polish it a bit more. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off the frets. Let's zoom out here. I think that zoomed out. No, it didn't. No, it did. Zoom out, and I'm going to mark the frets up for leveling, and we've got a nice freshly papered truss rod file. It's got fresh new that stuff sandpaper stuck to it, so really I'm not expecting to remove much material on these. I'm expecting to move some in order to basically reduce the amount of fret slap on the low E and possibly the A a little bit. But what I also want to do, which I forgot to mention, was the reason I kept bending at the top there is that we've got a bit of choke out of this action whilst bending a whole tone on the high E, and it sort of bends as it gets across, it chokes a little bit as it gets across to the D track, and this process, this leveling process, will not only will it clear up the fret slap, but it will also free up those bends, so we should be able to get a good clear one-tone bend out of it. So we've got D'Addario 10s to go back on here. Word on the street is that these guitars don't like ultralight strings. Okay, well, I'm looking at the angle of this just to double check on here, and actually I have to say the angle is fine for playing. You'd have to hit that really hard for that to come off. Same there, so I don't think that's a problem. Right, so that's the frets marked, and here we're going to get the leveling beam onto them. Same old technique, same thing, left-handed, right-handed. I'm going to start from this case I'm going to start from the bass side and work across. It doesn't really matter. On right-hand guitars I start on the other side, but it's just doing the same thing. Doesn't matter where you start. So I'm now aiming to calibrate this beam so that it maps a curve evenly between these 3 points. Now that makes, as I mentioned before, that makes a sort of idealized curve, which we know we haven't really got. We know that underneath the strings, the frets are doing a few sort of odd things, like I would call it like the bottom of the sea bed. So what I'm doing is I'm just letting the bar do its thing, and what the bar will do is the way it cuts the frets will usually tell me something quite early on in the process, which is always interesting. So it's telling me that it's cutting everywhere, more or less everywhere, except there's a low fret there, and there's a couple of low frets at the end here, and everything else is cutting fairly evenly, which tells us that that's pretty much okay. This fret here isn't low enough to cause a problem, which is good. Well, see, if you hit them hard, the strings need more room to spin. So there's a kind of ultimately a limit to what you can do with leveling or this work here. Depending on the combination of the scale length, the string gauge, and your playing strength or style, can dictate the limits to the low action you can set. Because the bottom line is, if you are a heavy hitter, then you have to accept there is a limit to the low action you can have. Something has to give if you hit the strings quite hard. And usually it's the lowness of the action, or the either the lowness of the action or the straightness, flatness of the neck. It's not bad though. Now I'm going to do the others in turn, but bearing in mind that they've not got any, they didn't have any significant noticeable problems, so I don't want to linger long on here, but I'll just do it to make sure we iron out any high spots or uneven spots. Feels good, feels good. There are some uneven or some high frets in the middle there, a group of. Now I'm going to recalibrate here as I move to the next that thing, I call it track. That's still spot on, so I'll use that as is. So obviously this kicks up some, or makes some dust, which we'll wipe clean in the final cleanup. Now this is the G track, sorry, this is the D track. The next one, the G track, is the one that typically causes problems when you come to bend the high E string across. It usually gets choked out in the G track, so we'll take care of that next. It's just that look how the D plays. Pretty good. Now calibrating for the G track. Somebody on YouTube accused me of not checking these size of these little brass feet, and I've used them for 7 years and they've all worn at exactly the same rate over the 7 years. A bit like when you have a guitar neck with a set of frets that have been played for decades and they self-level because you played them flat or played them flatter, and it's like you just don't need to level them out because they are level. Okay, so that's the G track. You see there's a cluster of frets in the middle here that are uneven, so they're relatively high relative to the rest of the board. So that's something that you can't tell until you have the neck under load. But this method takes care of that while the neck's under load. It's good. We're getting a tone out of it without choking. That's what I wanted. Can't really hope for too much more at a low action like this. I mean, that's the what's the word? That's the challenge. If you want a huge bend, it helps for the action to be lower, but if it's too low, then uneven frets come into play, and actually then you have to factor in the business of the neck radius, and if the radius is too tight, then you won't be able to bend without choking. So on 7.2 7.25 inch radii, it's very, very difficult to get a low action and full bends, and it's just there's no amount of leveling that's going to save you or get you out of that paradox. So you have to, something has to give, and if you want the bends, you have to raise the action a little higher. Depends on your playing style, but okay, all done. So that's the we've got rid of some of the fret slap on the low E. We've lowered the action. We've made it play well at that low action. Just going to look for a tusk string tree. Have we got one in there? Have we got one here? We've only got a black one. I suppose that will do because the nut's white, but the plastics are black. That's it. Must order more. They make these packets with distinct impossibility to open them. Right. So I made a tiny adjustment to the neck relief, added a little tiny bit of relief into the mix. We lowered the playing action or last fret action. Let's have a look. Shall we use this existing? Better if possible to use the existing screw, because then it doesn't risk splitting out anything. There you go. And why not? Okay, we'll keep this and one of these. Need a little baggie, a wee baggie, not that one. This will do. That's going to go on a different guitar. That's going up the side of that nut slot. Let's fix that before we go any further. Okay, so you can see this is a messy business. So the next step is I'm going to take these strings off. I'm going to put the leveling stuff away. Take the strings off, throw them away. They've done their service as sacrificial strings. Then I'm going to lift the cover because I want to change that switch around so it runs up and down. Yeah, definitely toggle to go up and down. So we'll get that sorted out. And then I will polish out all these, or recrown the frets first, and then I'll polish them all out and sand them out to a shine. And we'll be ready to rock and roll. Put new strings on, put some oil on the board, clean everything up, put new strings on, and stretch them out and intonate them. We should be, with tens we should be good. The tremolo shouldn't need any adjustment, everything should be good. So I'm glad I got to the bottom of this fairly quickly because I spent quite a lot of time this evening not getting anywhere with that darned preamp. Now these would be useful as a set of sacrificial strings since they're not that old. And I have to get them off in one piece, which makes very boring television viewing. Right. So, what's the news in the wider world? Reloved world. It's all good. Hopefully, everything's still in order. Got a nice varying amount of work to do on guitars, which is could be a lot worse. Very grateful to work on guitars, which is something I enjoy, as opposed to doing something I don't. But I think I long ago gave up doing things that I wasn't interested in, no matter how much I needed the money or how much money was involved. I think you can get to a certain point in your life where no amount of money translates into repayment, or meaningful, sensible repayment, or trade-off for the time you lose doing something that perhaps doesn't feel, not even that it feels good, it's not even like not even an ego thing, and it's got to feel great all the time. I think for me it's always been something about whether it feels worthwhile or whether there's a tangible result at the end of it. And I think one of the problems with corporate stuff that I used to do or have done in the past, it just doesn't feel, you don't see the consequences of what you do, and half the time it is because there isn't really any. A lot of what goes on in the corporate world, I'm sorry to say, is It seemed to me anyway to be sort of going through some motions because it's ticking boxes. Somebody said we'll do this because the staff need that, so we do that, and then because you've commissioned that, it's like everyone then colludes together to kind of pretend that it was worthwhile. I mean, I'm being perhaps a little bit negative about it, but that's what it felt like to me a lot of the time. That even if it was terrible or it really didn't make any difference, or let's say it didn't represent good value for the money they spent on it, it's kind of like, it's almost like everyone's got a vested interest in making sure everyone thinks it did. You know, it was a good spend of the money, which I don't know. That I never liked that feeling. So I always wanted to make whatever I did something meaningful, but it's quite difficult to hold out for that in the corporate world, because my experience was that a lot of people were just getting through. And actually, I think I found that in the corporate world, you can quickly come to believe that what you're doing has some profound importance, you know, when in fact it really doesn't. The world would go on perfectly without you and your initiative, whatever it is. But I think this, when everybody's ego is tied so much up with what they do and where they are on some corporate hierarchy or promotion ladder, then it's not at all surprising that we all make out our stuff as so darned important. But there's nothing I ever experienced in the corporate world which compares to when somebody tells me a few months after buying one of my guitars and they tell me that it's the one they go to all the time and it's the best one they've ever played. You know, that's more tangible a result than just about anything I ever did in the corporate environment. So at this point I'm just cleaning off the dust and the pen, and sort of basically making the fingerboard, cleaning the fingerboard so that I can put masking tape on it to mask off the fretboard, so we can polish out the frets. When it's all done, when I finish the polishing and stuff, I will give everything a once over as well. But while we're here, and before I get into the polishing, let's get this off, and let's get the jack turned round. I think the important thing. Oh, wrong, wrong one. That's one of the switches. Come on. The important thing when we put these back on will be to make sure we don't over tighten it like it is already a little bit. So for that I'll use my other screwdriver with the torque setting. I think I'm going to run a little bit late tonight. That's okay. this isn't. Gotta work out which is the. Oh no! Don't tell me I have to take the neck off as well. No, please, come on, you can do it. You can do it. Oh no, it's going to make me take the neck off, isn't it? I think it is. Oh no, no, just about. Oh wow, what a tight fit. Oh my heavens! Right, let's get this undone and turned around. It is a viper's nest under there. So, oh wow. I'll show you two things. I'll show you the viper's nest. Dun, 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 dun. Whoa, ooh, ooh. Now, this may not be as simple as all that. I think we have a problem here. I don't think you can turn that switch sideways. There's not enough room. Just thought I'd show you that as well. Forget my dirty windows, but how beautiful is that for a sun setting here in West Devon. Wow. Fab, eh? Yeah, right, yeah, okay. The problem we've got is currently this will be neck, this will be bridge, and you want down to be bridge, so you have to turn it. We might just get away with that. Let's have a sort of look. The only way it's going to work is possibly that way down. Let's just make a slight. Stay there. Thank you. These wires want to move. Do they want to move? They can touch there. It doesn't. It's not going to go all the way around. That's the problem, because it's. Maybe it will. Maybe it will. Come on, you can do it. Now you see, then the problem is we're going to be hitting the wall. I think we can probably get to there. It's not brilliant. Ooh, everybody, fit back in under there. Yeah, well, it's going to be that's the best it's going to be, but I have to tighten it up first. So. That really is as good as it's going to be, I'm afraid. It's sort of up and down. It's just the physical structure in there won't allow it. That's the truth of the matter. There isn't room to do it, much as I would like there to be. Right, while we're here, let's get a cloth and give this all a little pat down. Now, I think we've got some wires getting in the way now. For dumped. Down you go. Stay. Put one in the end here before we get anything else springing up. Everybody. Yeah, just about. Okay, let's wipe this clean. Okay. Right. Yeah, it's funny that there's only possibly just about, I'll test it in a second. Well, I can't really test it until I've got strings on, but the problem with this, if you turn it round and the contacts, the hot lugs, touch the finish, which they may, well, I tried to keep them from doing, but if they do, you may get a short out which interferes with the signal, which we don't really want that to be the case, but you don't have a lot of freedom still. Okay, so once I've, next thing I'm going to go off camera, I'm going to mask off the whole neck and do the polishing, sanding and polishing stage. And once that's done, I'll come back on to restring and intonate, stretch and intonate. Okay. Let's just wipe this down. Actually, I'll do it all at the end. Right, so that's it for now. Let me go off, do this polishing out. Once I've done the sanding, I'll then clean up all of the guitar and before I put the new strings on. But first of all, masking time. All right, see you in a minute. Run. We are running. Okay. Righty-ho. It's late, I'm running late, but I'm ready now, pardon me, to put on the new strings and stretch them out and check the intonation. We're all good to go. Whew. And that will be it for this evening. Doing. So tomorrow I've got Martin's brother's left-handed fretless bass to do, and I think, I'm fairly sure I know what the problem with that one was as well, so I look forward to putting that right. I think it's lost any neck relief over the time, and being a fretless and being quite a low action anyway, I think it needs certainly needs that extra, or it needs some relief anyway, and hasn't got any. So just before I do these strings up, I'm going to run some oil over the fingerboard. So this was off camera. I masked off the neck, polished out, sanded the frets out and polished them out. So the sanding goes through 400 grit, 600 grit, 1000 grit, 1500 grit, and then goes to micro mesh pads which run from 1500 all the way up to 12,000 grit, so it's a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to pull back a fret's worth. See if I can see this. Yep, there we go. Pull back a fret's worth and then wind it on. So we go over the loose string first, pull up the loose string on the way round, and guide the held string under the loose string the second time round, and that sort of forms a locking thing, for which I will need to snip it off. Yes, so I think with the with this here preamp that I was trying to fit tonight, I think I'm just going to have to give up on this kind. I think even if I got it to work, I would not really be able to work around the problem, which is how to set it to whatever level. How do you know what level to set it? Because the problem is, and I think this is a terrible mistake, the guy who's made it has chosen to have a spinning trim pot. In other words, it doesn't have a start and a finish, and because of that, it just keeps on spinning, so you can't set it in any position. So the only way you can know where it is on its scale is to have strings on the guitar and to hear it, and you have to make an audible judgment. You can't stop it halfway along its distance. Why you would make a trim pot that spins infinitely yet only has a certain amount of effect on its range at some point that you can't see or know, just seems to me a complete waste of time for a guitarist, at least. Anyway, so that's one of the main reasons why I think it's a no-go for me. I wasted some money on it. I think I have to send it back to him. I don't mind paying for one. Do I? I might send just. He was good enough to, when I said I couldn't get one working, he sent me another one, because I thought the first one was faulty, and I'm not sure it isn't actually. But like I say, even if it did work, which it certainly hasn't by the time I put it together in the guitar, it's not practical because you can't set it and know where it's set. So, and there's no real practical way around that. I can't imagine how a guitarist would, I say, apart from positioning it so the trim comes up through a hole or is visible in a hole in the plastic. But actually, if I look at it, I'm not even convinced that the trim pot stands far enough upwards out of the PCB to make that even possible. So who knows? Okay, so it's late, so I'm going to get this done pretty quick. But the thing here is we get the strings on, we wind them on, and then we make a big point of stretching the living daylights out of them. And that's the key part of having, one of the major aspects of keeping your guitar in tune is to get the slack stretched out of your strings. Having a good nut and well cut nut slots is critical, but the stretching the slack out of your strings is equally important. So if I just see if I can show you, this is what I do. I will stretch them out, bend them with my thumb and forefinger. I mean, the first time is just a good stretch to get them bedded in nicely, but then I go up and down the entire length and stretch them out between thumb and forefinger, and I really do this until it stops detuning between stretches. It'll take as long as it needs. I sanded off the nut with 600 grit paper as well, just to kind of smooth it off. Boing, and we get a note. So again, plenty of stretching to do. ostrich is. I'm pretty sure that this will be intonated correctly, because I'm sure that Martin will have got that taken care of. Right, time to get up and go. Get up and go back home. Very good. Okay, that's it for tonight. Thank you for watching. Going to dash, stretch this a little bit more at home. Oh, let's just check the intonation. I'm pretty confident this will be on the ball. But let's give it a little look at. Can't get to play left-handed guitars, so it's a slight downer for me. Just get to twang it and all right. Yep. Okay, all done. Thank you for watching. Useful, good experience to have a Jazzmaster in. Just to kind of get my head around that tremolo system a little bit. Right, okay, thanks for watching. It's, what time is it now? Oh, it's 10:30 in the old Read Up Guitars workshop. So I'm going to take this and run, or tidy up a little bit, but then head for home. And we'll also take this with it too. Right, thanks for watching. See you again.